Hey, what's up, guys? Vigilant Texan here. Today I got a teaching I'm excited to bring to you called the Order of Malki Tzedek. I've recently posted a poll on both of my Facebook groups asking that very question there. Who was Malki Tzedek? Who was the guy from this little passage in Genesis 14? And let me read it for you. And Malki Tzedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High El. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram to the Most High El, possessor of the heaven and the earth, and blessed be the Most High El, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. So this guy comes out and he meets Abram and he blesses him, which is key. We're going to talk about this later. This blessing is more than just a, hey, bless you. And so it says he is the king of Salem there, which is also key, and a priest of the Most High El. So it gives us a little bit of facts and background about this guy. And I posted those polls. I would say on both of the different ones is a little bit more people leaning towards it being the Messiah, which is a popular opinion. We're going to talk about that later too. But I would like to try to put forth a case for it being Shem, Noah's son. I believe that man who appeared to Abraham in that passage was Shem, based on the chart below, and the city he was the king of. Like a Messiah, he was the high priest and king. I'll do my best to prove this over the course of this teaching. So here's this longevity chart, and I just realized that I actually have a little bit better copy that would probably look better here. Let's see. What the heck? Maybe not. I thought I had another thing of the lineage. Apparently not. So anyway, I'll just explain it. Basically, if this is a little blurry and you can't see it that good, well, I guess I could make it on full screen like that. Here's Shem here, and he lived way all the way out here past Abraham into Yitzhak's life, and even part of Yaakov's life. So Shem, if he indeed was the king of Salem, which I'm going to show you here from some other sources that he was, then that means he would have still been reigning when this happened back here during Abraham's life, which would have been somewhere around in here before he was 100, like 75. So maybe even Noah would have still been alive, but as we're going to see in a bit, Noah had already ordained Shem as the priest. Here is a reference that's outside the Bible, and I know that some people are really sticklers on sticking to just the canonized scripture, and I understand that, and I agree that we should only ever use the canonized scripture for doctrine, especially just, stick with the Torah and what Messiah said. But when it comes to debating on historical facts and who was who, I see no problem with using historians, other sources. I try to lean away from using the rabbis, but you know what? They're not always the best source anyways. But if they agree with me, sometimes I will go ahead and say, hey, at least this rabbi here agreed with me on this particular fact. So here's one from Josephus, The Wars of the Jews, in 6:438. It says, but he, and it was earlier establishes we're talking about Shem, but he who first built it, talking about the temple, was a potent man among the Canaanites, and is in our own tongue called Malki Tzedek, the righteous king, for such he really was, on which account he was there, the first priest of Elohim, and first built a temple there, and called the city Jerusalem, which was formerly Salem. Interesting. Okay. Let's take a look into a little bit of the etymology of this, because what I'm trying to establish here is that Shem was the reigning king in Salem, and that Salem is where the place is that we're talking is, the place that it is biblically. We're going to try to establish where that is, and a couple of other interesting facts that I came across as I started to do this research that I just thought were very relevant as well. Here's one from Psalms 76, 1 through 2 that gives a little background. It says, "In Judah is Elohim known. His name is great in Israel. In Salem also is his tabernacle and his dwelling place in Zion." So apparently King David knew that this temple needed to be in the old city of David, which also brings me to the point that the Temple Mount, what they say is the Temple Mount nowadays, is not actually, I believe, the right place. I think they have it over in where the Roman, part of the Roman stuff that they built during that empire was, and actually the real temple was an old town city of David, the ancient city of David. And really, when I started to look up I was trying to find some more information just about Jerusalem and Salem and where this stuff took place. And boy, the city of Jerusalem has been conquered and destroyed and rebuilt so many times. It's crazy. But anyway, from right there in Psalms, we can see the Strong's lookup for that word Salem, and it is in Hebrew Shalem, pronounced Shalem, the same as Shalem, peaceful. Shalem, an early name of Jerusalem. So there we go from the Strong's. It verifies that Jerusalem used to be called Salem. And then if we look up Jerusalem, it's actually pronounced Yerushalem, and then sometimes Yerushalayim, I guess sometimes, an allusion to its main hills. The two pointing, at least the former reading seems to be that Yerushalayim, from the two words Yara and Shalem, founded peaceful, the capital city of Palestine, or Jerusalem. Let's look at a little passage from Genesis. This is right when when Abraham went to go offer Isaac as a burnt sacrifice. It says he had to take him a 3 days journey to Moriah, and I remember previously, before I came into the truth and really started digging in, I used to always think, well, why did they have to go a 3 days journey away? Was that just some kind of test from Yah so that they would have to see that he was physically going to go far away, to prove that he was going to take this action to go? No. I'll show you in a second here. "And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up as a burnt sacrifice instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Yahweh, or Yahuwah Yareh." Okay? And if you notice that Yareh is the same 3 syllables in Hebrew as Yara, which is the place, the name that was combined with Shalem to make Yerushalem. So Mount Moriah was in Salem. So judging by the facts, we can deduce that when Shem and Abraham were both alive, they changed the name to Yerushalem because Abraham's encounter with Yah, while he was faithfully obeying Yah, this also explains why Abram had to journey to that place to make a sacrifice, because there was already a temple there and a high priest who was Shem, the Malki Tzedek. Ding, ding, ding. Studying this stuff starts to connect a lot of cool dots for me. It's been a blessing and a pleasure to be able to study this stuff and try to put this together for y'all. Here's the interesting from 2 Chronicles 3:1. "Then Solomon began to build the house of Yahweh at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah." Bing! More confirmation. "Where Yah appeared unto David his father, in the place that David had prepared in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite." Now here is from the Jewish library, which I said I don't like to use rabbis too much, but when even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So let's see. "Shem, the firstborn son of Noah, escaped the destruction of the earth by flood and joined his family in the ark. After the flood, Shem covers his father's nakedness, and when he becomes intoxicated from his vineyard, he plants. Shem had 5 sons: Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, Aram. Some rabbinic sources note that Shem is also King Malki Tzedek. The term Semite is linguistically originating from Shem. So this guy Shem not only was the Malki Tzedek, but his name Shem, the Hebrew word that the Jews like to use for the father is Hashem, okay? That means the name. So Shem itself, he names his kid name. This kid is named name. And then his name becomes Semite, Shemite, Semitism. We're going to see some more once we get to his kid. This Malki Tzedek line, a lot of the languages came from them. A lot of the differences in the progression of the Hebrew language was through these guys. It's just very interesting as I'm learning these things. So let's take a look at Yasher and get some more background info on Shem. And Naamah conceived and bore a son and called his name Japheth, saying, God has enlarged me in the earth. And she conceived again and bare a son and called his name Shem again, saying, Elohim has made me a remnant to raise up a seed in the midst of the earth. And Noah was 502 years old when Naamah bare Shem, and the boy grew up and went in the ways of Elohim, and all that Methuselah and Noah their family taught them. So awesome that we know he was a well-taught young guy, and he lived 100 years before the flood when Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah were all alive. So I'm sure he got some great time to learn from those guys, even though they were 500, 700 years old. So then let's see where Shem got his. So there we can see where Shem got his teaching from. So where was Shem's kingdom? Let's try to establish this a little bit more. Genesis 10:30 says, and their dwelling was from Mesha, as thou goest unto Sephar, a mount of the east. Moses. Thanks for being shiesty with the details, as usual, Moses. So we go on over to Jubilees, and we get some much better details. This actually talks about the story of what happened there, and apparently Lot and his sons, after they got off the boat, they decided to throw lots. So they're shaking up the lots, and they throw them, and this portion came forth by Lot for Shem and his sons, that they should possess it forever unto his generations forevermore. And Noah rejoiced that this portion came forth for Shem and for his sons, and he remembered all that he had spoken with his mouth in prophecy, for he had said, Blessed be the Elohim of Shem, and may Elohim dwell in the tents of Shem. And he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies, the dwelling place of Yah, and Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as holy places facing each other, and he blessed the Most High El, who had put the words of Elohim in his mouth, and Yah forevermore, and knew that a blessed portion and a blessing had come to Shem and his sons, unto that generation forever, the whole land of Eden, the whole land of the Red Sea, the whole land of the east, India, and on the Red Sea, the mountains thereof, and the land of Bashan, which later we find out was where Caleb and Yehoshua went and took out the giants, and we're going to talk about that later too. There's another cool picture I found, a painting of bread and wine bearing Malki Tzedek. So, what is an order of priests? Because some people will sit here and just argue with me about that word, order. Let's take a look here. Psalms 110:4. Yah has sworn and will not repent. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. That word order, Strong's number 1700. Hebrew, debrah. Okay? Debrah. Feminine of debar. A reason, a suit, or a style. So the debar is the root, which means to properly arrange, but use figuratively. Okay, so to properly arrange, but in a stylish way. And then we can get some more from this when Hebrews 7:17 quotes Psalm 110:4. See, so there we get not only the Hebrew word, but we find what the writer of Hebrews, the Greek word he chose to translate there was taxis. Taxis, a regular arrangement, a fixed succession, or a rank, okay, an official dignity or an order. So what we have here is a and even the word dabar just means word. So it's really like an order of word. I think the root here, no, that's, dabar, perhaps properly to arrange. So to arrange properly in a style or a suit in a fixed succession officially. Sounds like a priestly, priesthood to me. I mean, I don't see how, looking at the etymology, you could come up with anything other than an order of priests, which is a line of arranged people after a certain style or character, okay? Now, the original priestly line according to the Torah or word of Elohim. Noah ordained Shem as the first Melchizedek. Let's take a look at that. Genesis 9:27 or 20 through 27. And Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. Here's the same story. And he drank wine. And this is from Genesis, though, not from Yasher. But we'll skip down to the end here. And Noah woke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him. And he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren." And he said, "Blessed be Yah, the Elohim of Shem, and Canaan shall be a servant. Elohim shall enlarge Japheth, and Elohim shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be a servant." Here we have from Jubilees. So this is, did we have Yasher up there before? For the original? Guess not. So let's see what Jubilees said. And Noah awoke from his sleep and knew all that his younger son had done to him. Okay, let's skip on down. And he blessed Shem, saying, "Blessed be the Elohim of Shem." And see, what I'm trying to say here is there's multiple places in the scripture here where the author goes out of his way to show us a meeting, okay? A meeting between someone we know who is a high priest and someone else who we understand later becomes a priest or a preacher of righteousness, okay? So to me, it seems totally, it doesn't seem crazy at all to me to say that what we're actually seeing, what we're being shown here, is an ordination ceremony, a passing of the torch, a changing of the guard. It happens right up here in Genesis 14, and seemingly out of the blue, but when you think about it in these terms, what was about to happen? Okay, all these kingdoms had just fought, the 5 kings versus the 4. Many people had died, a lot of destruction had happened. Shem's getting extremely old at this point. Eber's, already born. So Shem's getting old, and he's knowing that maybe he's realized that all of the children of Eber and the ones below that are not really up to snuff, okay? Because this is the thing about the Malki Tzedek. It doesn't just rely on lineage. You have to prove yourself. So, Abraham had proved himself, and we're going to get into that as well as we go through and study the references of who studied under. And so, to me, what makes you a Malki Tzedek? It's studying under another preacher of righteousness after the order of Shem, the original Malki Tzedek. So, if there was a study group here, so to speak, where this knowledge transfer was happening from high priest to high priest, and we're going to go down through these high priests as we go, but there was a knowledge transfer happening here. There was an ordination happening here. We have Shem, who we're going to find out had trained Abraham, and then we're going to find out that that now there's a reason that this guy comes out. It's not just, oh, you won a great war. He was ordaining Abraham to become a Malki Tzedek. And not only that, but some of the children, some of the participants in the war were Shem's descendants. In fact, technically tons of them were Shem's descendants, but some of them were actually listed. But anyway, let's get back to our list here. All right. Genesis genealogy. So in Genesis 10:22, we get a short list of Shem's kids. It just says children of Shem: Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, Aram. Then moving right along, other people's kids. We don't get hardly any information there, other than a list of kids. So then, later in Genesis 11, we get a lineage. Okay, so let's go over here, pull that up real quick. I didn't want to put it in my notes because it was a little big, and I'm going to skip through it. Okay, so out of the blue, we get the story of Nimrod happened there in between. Very strange. Here's the story of Nimrod. And then after the story of Nimrod, out of the blue here, and these are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100-year-old and begot Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he begot Arphaxad 500 years and begat sons and daughters. And Arphaxad lived 530 years and begot Shelah. And Arphaxad lived after he begot Shelah 430 years. Is this pattern sounding familiar to anyone? Because this is the same exact wording, the same exact pattern that was used through the original Melchizedek priestly line, the pre-flood one, going from Adam to Seth, and on down the line there. This is the same exact wording. So, and we know that before the flood, Adam and all of his descendants, they had tons of kids. So Adam, and then he had a bunch of kids, but we're only told about Seth because he was the next priest. You see what I'm saying? And then Seth had tons of kids, but we're only told about Enosh because he was the next in line for the priesthood. You follow me? And then he had tons of kids. He lived 900 years, but we're only told Canaan was the next in line. So this is a priestly line here. And this priestly line, Noah was the 8th, okay? And Shem the 9th. But then we're getting lineage, and the reason we're getting lineage is because we're trying to get to Abraham. But this is not the priestly line. Shem didn't pass the priesthood until Aber, and then Aber was still alive all the way till Abraham. So even though it's using that wording because it's giving us the genealogy, you can't become a high priest until the previous one dies, unless they come and ordain you. And the thing is there was different kingdoms here. So part of the reason why I believe Shem ordained Abraham was because he needed to be a priest over his own kingdom, his own land. But, since there was a high priest already who Abraham knew, and we're going to see that, he had to go get Shem's permission, basically. So let's talk about the next in line after Shem, which is Eber. Okay, now this guy, real interesting guy. Cannot skim over this guy, because Eber, boy, his name, Eber, which in Hebrew is Ibri, is actually the root word of Hebrew. Okay, Eberite, the Hebrew, a descendant of Eber. So what it means to be a Hebrew is to be a descendant of Eber. And the reason why I believe they had to put that in there to make sure that Hebrews were only Ebers was because Shem had so many kids, and some of the ones ended, like Asher, I believe, ended up being like the Assyrians or something. I mean, it wasn't good enough just to be one of Shem's kids. So they needed to make sure that these Hebrews, which were basically Eber and Abraham and then Abraham's kids, because what does Hebrew mean? We're going to find that out. Here we go. Eber, name of two patriarchs, Aber and Eber, but then the root of that is Eber, a region across, used on adverbally, okay, on the opposite side, especially of the Jordan. Okay, it says especially of the Jordan. So Aber is the other side of the Jordan, but the root of that is Abar, which means to cross over. So literally the name Hebrew means to cross over to the other side of the Jordan. And that's what this kid's name means, because through him they would cross over and populate both sides of the Jordan. Let's look at a little excerpt here from the Jewish Library real quick. They had some more stuff correct, so as long as they get stuff correct, I'll throw their stuff up here. According to the biblical tradition, the Hebrews are people's descendant from Shem, one of Noah's sons, through Eber, the eponymous ancestor. Eponymous? And Abraham. So they even specify not just Eber, but Eber and Abraham. Reports that the flood destroyed all life except that in Noah's ark. Consequently, the whole human family descended from Noah and his sons, Japheth, Ham, but specifically the Hebrews went through Eber. So, interesting. And then another little interesting thing that I learned while looking through this study was I finally understood what Genesis 10:25 is talking about. It's just going through this genealogy, and then all of a sudden, and unto Abram were born 2 sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided. Now, some translations will say the nations. I've even seen some say the families, but this says the earth. But that word divided is actually the Hebrew word Peleg, which is the kid's name. So his name literally means to be divided. But in the days of Peleg, not only are the nations divided, but also the people were divided spiritually. Okay? Think about it. They were spiritually divided between Salem and Babylon. Shem calling people to Yah in Salem, and Nimrod calling people to Baal in Babylon. Okay? The whole thing was literally divided. They get off the boat, everyone starts to settle. Shem becomes the king of righteousness, the Malki Tzedek, and Nimrod becomes the Antichrist, basically, the anti of that. And eventually, Shem's shining student, Abraham, ends up getting in a huge spat with Nimrod. And if you haven't seen my video on that, it is a great story. Go check it out. But that's what it means by the nation being divided. Literally, can you imagine your kids growing up in your house and you trying to teach them Torah, and knowing that as soon as they get old enough, they're gonna be able to leave and go to Babylon and just totally polar opposite, learn a way to live that's totally the opposite. And you know that still goes on today. You know, think about when I was in my early 20s and I moved to Houston. Ooh, you know what? Why? Probably because I could go do whatever I wanted to do, right? Not have somebody watching over me. But anyway. Okay, so the next one in line was Abram. In the book of Yasher, when Abram was a babe, he had to be hidden in a cave to escape Nimrod's decree to kill Hebrew boys, because they saw something in the stars that said, and we're going to talk about that later, that said, you know, a Hebrew was going to be born that would take the, I guess, be, I don't know, I don't remember exactly the prophecy, but anyways. But then later in chapter 9, we read this, in Yasher 9, and when Abram came out of the cave, he went to Noah and his son Shem, and he remained with them to learn the Torah of Elohim and his ways. And no man knew where Abram was, and Abram served Noah and Shem and his son for a long time. And Abram was in Noah's house 39 years. So that's why we don't get to hear about that big chunk of life when he's a middle-aged man. And Abram knew Elohim from 3 years old, and he went in the ways of Elohim until the day of his death. And Noah and his son, as Noah and his son Shem had taught him. Okay, so now we know for sure that Abraham was the Malki Tzedek. Not only did he learn under Shem, but he was ordained by Shem. So now Abraham is the Malki Tzedek. Then Yitzhak. Lots of story to get to this point, but we're skipping, obviously. This is that incident, just a picture of that incident. So let's listen of why I can put Isaac or Yitzhak in this line of Malki Tzedek. Yasher 24. And the days of Sarai were 127 years, and she died, and Abraham made a great and heavy mourning, and he performed the rites of mourning for 7 days. And when the days of their mourning passed by, Abraham sent away his son Isaac, and he went to the house of Shem and Eber to learn the ways of Elohim and his Torah. And Abraham remained there 3 years. There you go. Is that supposed to be Isaac? That's weird. Maybe a typo there. But anyway. I think that's supposed to be Isaac. Let's be a typo there. Okay, then next, Jacob. What, you're going to tell me Jacob was a Malki Tzedek too? I know, right? Well, I mean, Yah did chosen to make Israel out of. But let's read about Jacob. This is where he gets the blessing from Yitzhak to be the Malki Tzedek, I believe. And I believe that's why Esau got so upset. And it came near, and he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment, and blessed him, and said, See, the smell of my son is the smell of a field which Yah hath blessed. Therefore, Elohim, give thee of the dew of the heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee. Be master over thy brethren, and let them other sons bow down to thee. Cursed be everyone that curseth thee, and blessed be everyone that blesseth thee. So this is definitely the blessings from Yaakov. From Yitzhak. A shame that Yaakov had to be a little sneaky to get it. But let's get some more information on that. And also, obviously, Elohim comes and talks to Abraham. Elohim talks to Yitzhak. Elohim talks to Jacob. So he's involved too. But as far as the priestly line, let's see. Can we consider Yaakov a Melchizedek? Let's see. At that time, Isaac sent his younger son Yaakov to the house of Shem and Eber, and he learned the Torah of Elohim. And Jacob remained in the house of Shem and Eber for 32 years, and Esau his brother did not go, for he was not willing to go, and he remained in his father's house in the land of Canaan. So, no wonder Rebecca and Jacob had to pull this little stunt here, because they knew that Jacob had spent 32 years with Eber and Shem, and while Isaac just stuck around and slept with Canaanite women and screwed off and, the daughters of Heth or whatever. So they had to do it, man. They had to do it. Isaac was old and senile and out of his wits for one day, I guess. Let's get some more information, because later, actually, after that happens, in Yasher 29, and Esau hated his brother Jacob on account of the blessing that his father had given him, and his anger was greatly roused against him. And Jacob was very much afraid of his brother Esau, and he rose up and fled to the house of Eber and the son of Shem. Go back where they taught you. Concealed himself there, and Jacob was 63 years old when he went there, and he was concealed in Eber's house 14 years on account of his brother Esau, and he there continued to learn the ways of Elohim and his commandments. So I think we can consider Yaakov a Melchizedek. Now, what about Yosef and Benjamin? Was Yaakov the last one? Because we're really not told about anybody else going and studying with Shem and Eber. So is it fair to consider anyone else a Melchizedek when they did not study under Shem and Eber? I don't know. Well, let's get a little info from a little interesting story here from Yasher chapter 53 that we got in last week's Torah portion that I thought was very interesting. And Yosef brought them out wine to drink. Okay, let me give you the background. So this is Yosef's been sold into slavery, and then he becomes the Grand Vizier, and now he's the Grand Vizier, and there's a huge famine in the land, and his brothers come, and he tricks them and sends them back, and finally they come back the final time, and Benjamin's with them, and so they're having this meal, and Yosef says, I've got this cup, this divine cup that lets me do divination, and because of this divine cup, and I don't know if he was lying or not, he said, because of this cup, I'm able to seat you guys in order. So he seats them all down in order, okay? But then we get some more of the story in chapter 53. And Yosef brought them out wine to drink, but they would not drink. And they said, From this day on which Yosef was lost, we have not drunk wine, nor eaten any delicacies. Now, you think they were fibbing there? It's a long time. Anyway, and Yosef swore unto them, and he pressed them hard. And so they drank plentifully with him on that day. And Yosef afterward turned to his brother Benjamin to speak with him. And Benjamin was still sitting upon the throne before Yosef. And Yosef said unto him, Hast thou begotten any children? And he said, Thy servant has 10 sons, and these are their names. And he ordered them to bring before him this map of the stars. So Yosef tells his orderlies to bring me my map of the stars, okay? Whereby Joseph knew all the times. So apparently Yosef knew astrology to the point where he could draw a map of the stars and use this map to know the times, all the times. Now, I'm going to use a little conjecture here and say that by all the times, he means the appointed times of the Moedim of Yah. Because what other times would you need a calendar for to know if you're in the Torah and you're trying to make sure you follow your, I can only assume that they had to have been appointed times. Obviously, it couldn't have been Passover. That hasn't happened yet. But, you would want to know when the first of the year was and when the new moon was, and you'd want to know when the crops cycles were, and I'm sure they would have had like a feast of ingathering when all the crops came in. But, or it could just mean like prophetic times, like knowing what's about to happen. Anyway, and Joseph said unto Benjamin, I have heard that the Hebrews are acquainted with all wisdom. Dost thou know any of this? Pointing at the map. And Benjamin said, Thy servant is knowing also in all the wisdom which my father has taught me. And Joseph said unto Benjamin, Look now at this instrument, and understand where thy brother Joseph is in Egypt, who you said went down to Egypt. And Benjamin held that instrument with the map of the stars, and he was wise, and looked therein to know where his brother was. And Benjamin divided the whole land of Egypt into 4 divisions, okay? And he found that found himself on the map, who was sitting upon the throne before him, the guy sitting on the throne, was his brother Yosef. And Benjamin wondered greatly. I'm sure he was like, what? And when Joseph saw that his brother Benjamin was so much astonished, he said to Benjamin, What hast thou seen, and why art thou astonished? And Benjamin said to Joseph, I can see by this, taking the map and the instrument, that Joseph my brother sitteth here with me upon the throne. And Joseph said unto him, I am Joseph thy brother. Reveal not this thing unto thy brethren. Behold, I will send thee with them when they go away, and I will command them to be brought back again to the city, and I will take thee away from them. And if, they dare their lives and fight for thee, then shall I know that they have repented of what they did unto me, and I will make myself known to them. And if they forsake thee, if they don't go with it, then I'll take thee, and then thou shalt remain with me, and I'll wrangle with them, shall go away. So Yosef has this plan. We're gonna stick this cup that I said was such a divine cup in your sack, and then they're gonna come back to get them. I'm gonna send to have them searched, and then they're gonna bring you back. And if they act like a bunch of heathens, well, then you can just stay here with me. And wouldn't that be cool? I'm sure he was wondering what was up with his little brother this whole time, and I don't know how close they were. I think his little brother probably would have been a little kid when it happened, when he left. Maybe not, but he didn't recognize him. Of course, none of the other guys recognized him either. But anyways, I just thought, wow, this story here. So what this is to me is proof that Yosef and Benjamin both had been well taught by their father Yaakov, who we know spent upwards of 40 years in the house of Shem and Eber. So I think it's safe to say that maybe they were Malki-Tzedek as well. And this is when I started looking up what the heck kind of instrument are they talking about. I found this thing. It's called, let's look over here, the Antikythera mechanism. Ancient analog computer to predict astronomical positions and eclipses for calendrical and astrological purposes. I mean, right about the same time. Now these are some cruddy pictures. Here's a picture search where I found that one with some other people's ideas of what it may have been like. I think that the pre-flood, the knowledge that they had, ancient knowledge, was very great, and that once the papacy, the Roman Catholics, took over and started conquering the world and destroying all the history and burning all the libraries and stuff, that I think a lot of the great knowledge that probably had was just, it's been lost. We've really devolved from here, not evolved. I think we've gotten dumber. You can see it by looking at all the ancient pre-flood structures that we have no idea how they even built them. So, but anyway, after that, here from Exodus, now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Yosef, and said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel, more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply and come to pass. Anyways, he says, let us appoint taskmasters over them to afflict them with burdens. And so they started building cities, and they're in slavery. So, well, I guess I skipped a little part of the story there. You know, he reveals himself to his brothers. They all move into Goshen. They leave. Okay, so yeah, this is key. So they all move into Goshen. They leave behind where they were settled. Okay, so while they were enslaved in Egypt, apparently, we don't get told exactly how it takes place, but apparently the Rephaim, the giants, go and like take over all the important land that was there, so that when they come out of slavery, they have to go reconquer all of that from the giants. So now we know all the story and not another Melchizedek till Yeshua. So there's no other, to me. Some people will try to tell you that Moses was Melchizedek, but Moses wasn't a king. Okay? And Moses had to get the Torah again because it was lost. So he got a new copy of the law, and you know, we can get into what may have been different, but I sure would have liked to have seen or learned what the Torah that Shem and Eber were teaching was, if there were any differences, and were they teaching a bunch of other stuff with the Torah, like astrology and stuff too? I think so. Obviously they were. Okay, so let's talk about rebuttal here. What about this one verse? Because people tell me, the supporters that say that Melchizedek was Messiah will take me this one verse in Hebrews. Without father, without mother, without descendant, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of Elohim, abideth a priest continually. Okay, well, the author of Hebrews, I believe, was Apollos, but even if it was Barnabas, they would have both grown up in an environment, or Paul even, where you had to have the right bloodline and all that information he mentioned in order to be eligible for priesthood. And priesthood changed often. Shem had his priesthood for 500 years. Then Yeshua's is eternal, okay? So neither Yeshua nor Shem were from the tribe of Levi or Aaron's bloodline. So because of the audience, he puts this verse in here. Because of this audience that he's talking to, everyone who's grown up under this Aaronic priesthood, he's got to put that in there to compare the two, Shem and Yeshua, so that you can tie that back. This is what the whole Melchizedek thing is to tie the new covenant that we get with the Messiah back to the old covenant that they lived under, and back to the old teaching way that Shem and Eber taught. You know, Yeshua was from the house of Judah, which tribe Moses spoke nothing pertaining to the priesthood. So the writer has to go into detail to convince them it was the truth. If the Levitical law was still in effect, Yeshua would not have been allowed to be a priest. Okay, so that's why they state that the Levitical priesthood must be done away with, and the priesthood was changed or transferred to the order of Melchizedek. Let's look at some separations between the Levitical priesthood and the order of Melchizedek. Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek. Okay. Later, the Levites would receive tithes from their countrymen. Since Aaron was in Abraham's loins then, it was as if the Aaronic priesthood were paying tithes to Melchizedek. The one who blesses is always greater than the one being blessed. Okay, like when Yaakov blesses Pharaoh. Thus, Melchizedek was greater than Abraham, and as Levi was yet in the loins of Abraham, it follows that Melchizedek is greater than Levi. If the priesthood of Aaron were effective, Yah would not have called a new priest in a different order in Hebrews 7:11. The basis of the Aaronic priesthood was ancestry. The basis of the priesthood of the Melchizedek is righteousness. You must prove yourself to be ordained. You know, when we look at that list in Genesis 11 of the genealogy, all these guys got skipped. Okay, Shem, Arphaxad, Selah, Eber. Okay, Eber was the priest, but then after Eber, Peleg, Ru, Sarug, Nahor, Terah. None of these folks were eligible because they weren't righteous. It wasn't until Abraham He proved himself. Okay. But that wasn't so with the Aaronic. It was one guy after the next. His oldest son, and then he got it, and then the next oldest son. They didn't go by righteousness. Messiah, being sinless, does not need a sacrifice for his own sins. Okay, the priesthood of the Levitical priest did. Okay, they had to make sacrifice for their own sins. The priesthood of Melchizedek is more effective because it requires a single sin sacrifice once and all from who was Yeshua, while the Levitical priesthood had to make endless sacrifices for atonement. Go read Hebrews. You don't understand. Heavenly or Yah ordained through direct consul, like the Melchizedek priesthood, whereas the Levitical priesthood was a lineage. I already said that, sorry. The Melchizedek priesthood always offered blessings, whereas the Levitical priesthood sometimes brought curses on the people. Melchizedek priests study in all areas of knowledge, including astrology and other things. Now, here's an interesting thing I found that basically ties the zodiac signs to the 12 tribes, and that it was originally the 12 tribes that were in the stars. And, I found a thing called biblical astronomy, and I thought it was really interesting, and that, this astrology, there's a lot to it. A lot of it makes sense. And I know some people who are into it and look at their signs and they read their stuff and they say, man, I'm so much a Sagittarius or Gemini or whatever it is. And so, you know what the enemy likes to do, though? They like to pervert it into a way to distract you from Elohim instead of using it for its true purpose, okay, which was to be able to look up and see the signs and the seasons, all right? You're supposed to use it to see the signs and the seasons, not to get your daily what's going to happen to me today, because that's a bunch of made up crap, alright? Let's look at Jubilees to get some proof of that. This is interesting. It's talking about Abraham. In the 6th week, in the 5th year thereof, Abraham set up throughout the night, so all night he sat up, on the new moon, which I think would be either totally blank or a sliver, so the best to observe the stars, and the 7th month to observe the stars from evening to morning. Okay, for the whole night he's going to watch them in order to see what would be the character of the year. Okay, with regards to the rains, he was alone and sat and observed, and the word came into his heart, and he said, all the signs of the stars and the signs of the moon of the sun are all in the hand of the Lord. Unless I didn't correct that. Why do I search them out? He's thinking to himself, yeah, this is cool being able to see what's going to happen, but why do I even bother to figure it all out and look if Elohim's in control anyways? Good question. Here is an interesting picture I found with a bunch of Hebrew writing on it. Some way to figure out, this is another example of some sort of way to look at the astrology and the signs with like an instrument. It's kind of cool from Jewish Encyclopedia. But what's the whole point of all this Melchizedek stuff? It goes back to this verse right here, Exodus 19. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a Malkuth of Kohanim, and a Kodesh nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. This is right before the covenant, confirming meal and all that. This is the marriage proposal. This is what Yah originally wanted when they came out of Egypt, was to be a kingdom of priests and a set-apart nation, a Malkuth of Kohanim, and a Kodesh nation. Here's from Revelations 1, 5, and 6. And from Yeshua Messiah, who is the faithful witness, and the first begotten of the dead, and the prince of the kings of the earth, unto him that loved us, and washed us from our sins in his own blood, and hath made us Malki and Kohanim unto Elohim and his Father. To him be the glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. And from 1 Peter 2:9, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a set-apart nation, a peculiar people, that you should shew forth the praise of him who hath called you out of darkness unto his marvelous light, which in times past were not a people, but are now called the people of Elohim, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. So you say, well, why do you want to be in the priesthood? Why do you want to be a priest? What's the point? All you need to do is believe and just follow Torah and do the right thing, and you'll get in the kingdom, right? Well, let's let's look a little bit here from Matthew 25. We're almost done. And so he that hath received the 5 talents, this is from the parable of the talents that Yeshua is giving, he delivered 5 more. His master said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy master. And in Luke, I believe, the other account of it says, basically the same thing. You've been faithful in a few things. I'll make you master over many kingdoms, I believe it says. And so to me, Messiah himself talks about being the least in heaven, being the greatest in heaven, So obviously, we're going to get kind of graded, and I would like to be, what would be a cooler job than to just study and teach Torah all day, every day? I couldn't think of any better job. I would love to get paid to do that. In fact, if anybody needs a leader for their church, if you have a church that needs a paid guy to study Torah and teach it, I'm your man. I would love to quit, being a network security technician or whatever, and playing basketball and just study Torah and teach Torah all day. So if anybody needs one. But anyway, there's my study of the Malki Tzedek. Hopefully it helped you at least get some information to use in your study. Whether you come to the same conclusion as me or not, that's fine. But hey man, go do the research, study, find the facts. Show yourself approved. Be a Berean. See you next time, guys. Shalom.